Guys, I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Ruby Payne. I got an opportunity to see Dr. Payne speak at a Region 8 Texas Superintendent Retreat this summer, and I was blown away. She is an unbelievable inspiration. The work she's doing with educators around the state and the country to help them understand how to connect better, more effectively, identify some challenges in behavior, and understand how to communicate with those families to create a bond and a real connection with their student population is just incredible. I mean, she had a whole room of superintendents just at the edge of their seats, and she's just such an amazing presenter. I decided I was going to roll the dice and take a chance and see if she'd be willing to come on the Ripple Effect podcast, because I think more of us need to be having these conversations, especially in light of all the school violence that we have seen in this country. Helping and contributing where we can. Well, that's one of the responsibilities we are as Ripplers. We've got to do what we can where we can. And Dr. Ruby and her work is amazing. She is actually the founder of AHA Process Inc., Poverty Reduction Professional Development Solutions Company. She's the author of several books, including A Framework for Understanding Poverty Now, a cognitive approach, now in its fourth edition. She also has emotional poverty in demographics, how to reduce anger, anxiety, and violence in the classroom. She has and is inspiring teachers, their administrators, the superintendents, all the school leadership to take a deep look at how to do things just a little bit differently, and talk about in a ripple that needs to happen. So it's so critical and so important right now. So super excited to have Dr. Ruby join us today. So let's dive into it. Guys, welcome to another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. I am super excited to have Dr. Ruby Payne join me today. As I mentioned in the introduction, she really caught my attention. Talk about a Rippler, somebody that's really making a difference out there in the world, especially with our educators and our leaders at the school districts. It's so critical and so important with all the challenges that they've got going on. But I just want to welcome you to the Ripple Effect podcast, Dr. Payne. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you here. I've got to be honest with you. I took a real big risk. I am introverted and shy. So when I saw you walking in the hallway that day before your second session, I was like, oh, do I say something? Do I go up and, talk to her? And I just had to tell you, because the night before, your presentation was phenomenal. I thought the way that you held those superintendents in your hand, the information that you shared with them, I could really tell, right? And I've been to a few of these conferences, and it's kind of funny when you see superintendents away from school and away from their communities, and they're with their friends. They're like the little kids that they're responsible for managing. They don't talk, or they talk, while a presenter's up on stage, and there's a lot of kind of jovial behavior going on, sometimes, and you captured them right from the jump. And I was so impressed with that. And I really, really appreciated the message behind it and the enthusiasm that you had in delivering it. But really, the key factor for any good presentation is you kept their attention. You got it and you kept it, and you had people talking afterwards. So that's got to be such a thrilling feeling for you. So when I met you that morning and I saw you coming down the hall, I'm like, I just have to recognize that, because as a speaker, you'd never know, right? People don't often tell you.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. As you and I were talking earlier, I think superintendents are a tough audience for this reason. They've got so many competing demands. They're like execs in a corporation. They got 5-10 minutes to give you, and then that's it. And If you're saying anything important for them, they've got mountains of tasks to do.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, before we start, I'm a big believer in origin stories. I'm a big comic book fan, and I love knowing what led somebody to be the superhero that they are. And you clearly have that superhero ability. I'm curious, how did Dr. Ruby Payne become Dr. Ruby Payne?
Well, first of all, let me just say a couple of things. The first book, A Framework for Understanding Poverty, that started this whole thing. First of all, I have a very deep faith, and I think that I'm basically a messenger. So the bottom line is I would be loath to take credit. Okay. I think you're placed in a path for certain reasons to do certain things. Okay.
Yep.
But what happened is my first marriage, and he died in 2010.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we were divorced before he passed away, but
Okay.
he grew up in extreme poverty. And so in order to understand him, I had to understand those rules. Then he became a trader in the Chicago Board of Trade. So then we're in with really wealthy people. And so things just aren't making sense.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done anything with it, but the fact that we had a situation in where I was director of professional development, and they wanted me to explain why they're having so many discipline referrals with a school. And so I started explaining, well, this is happening because, no, this is happening because, and no, this is what you need to do about it. No, that's not going to work, and this is why. And so they were going, where'd you learn all this? And I'm like, I don't really know. I know it, right?
Yeah.
So then the only reason I wrote a book is because people started calling for information, and each phone call took an hour. I was always behind. So then I thought, and then I found out you could publish and it was cheaper than Xerox. Okay. So I mean, grand design,
Yeah.
So then I called this number that said you can get books published for this amount of money. And I said, so how do you do that? Well, you have to have a company. So I found out you can do a DBA, doing business as, get a checking account. I did that. I put the first 500 books on credit card. I thought, well, heck, if they'll probably rot in the garage. I gave 100 of them away. I thought, well, better than what. And that's how the whole thing started. So
that is great. You and I are very similar. I sold a company in 2004. I didn't ever even know what consulting was. I had some of my prior customers that, I'd sold the customer base to to the company that acquired us. And they were like, Steve, you were always so great. I was in the office equipment business, and I started my career as the youngest Xerox agent. It's funny you said the word, right? I was the youngest Xerox agent in the country at the time. Didn't know a damn thing of what I was doing, right? But I figured it out, and I just had a different approach. I ended up leaving and selling that entity, moving to another dealership, which we created from the ground up. And we built our business because we were committed to solving problems and being a resource, not just selling equipment. So a lot of my customers came back to me at the time and said, we want you to come train us on customer service and sales. And I'm like, I'm not good at any of that. But I found that, I had a few things I'd share. And then hey, it just became more efficient rather than the same old things. Let me put it in a book. You read it if you want. And I printed up couple hundred, I printed up, a couple of 1,000 copies. Actually, I didn't know I was crazy, but I thought I'd sell a couple hundred copies maybe. And then my dad would buy the rest of the inventory and that'd be the end of the story. But here we are 16 years later or whatever. So who knew we would have this connection in common about I don't know. I'll just put it out on a book. Let's see what it does.
Yeah. Or just so it was just so I don't have to explain it all the time.
That's right. Yeah. Read the book.
Yeah. And so and then the second thing, this emotional poverty thing. Well, first of all, my passion is education. It's always been. I've always wanted to be a teacher from the time I was a little girl. I didn't play with dolls the way you're supposed to. I would line them up and teach them. You know what I mean? And I was the oldest of 6, so I corralled my siblings to be taught. Okay. And they were the worst class you could have imagined. I mean, they would fall asleep. Okay. They would complain to the principal, my mother, she was they got in fist fights with each other while I was trying. Oh my
gosh.
We've had a worse class. Okay. Yeah. So I learned that if you told stories, you could keep them. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, but I've been the reason I did the emotional poverty book is I'm very concerned because about 3 things. One, we haven't made any significant difference in student achievement between narrowing that gap between poor and wealthy kids in 50 years. Yep. And God knows the money's been spent on it. Okay. Yep. Number 2, teachers are leaving in droves because of the emotional issues that are in the classroom. And what they're doing is they're trying to use the same strategies, more and more and more, and they're not working. And the bottom line is if we don't have good teachers, we don't have good kids.
That's right. Yep. What was the third that really motivates you?
The third thing is that we we need better models. If we're going to educate better. So as I said in that workshop, I went back and probably read, I don't know, 400 or 500 books on emotional realities, because it seemed to me that's what we're missing.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, the thing that fascinated me about what you're doing, and it really tied into an episode I did earlier this year with Maxine Clark. I don't know if you know the name, but she's the founder of Build-A-Bear, and she is a big supporter of education and programs. But she is kind of like you. She went back and looked at the research. She understood, the basis of the problem, and recognized that a lot of the challenges we face is there's a lot of politicizing around the issues, right? We talk about it, but there's it's all hat and no cattle in a lot of ways, right? At the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of intent to make changes. And like you said, when you've got to identify and you got to understand what the problem is, but then you also have to have committed leaders that are going to say, look, we are going to not continue to do it the way we've done it. We've got to do things differently. Yes, that makes people uncomfortable. And yes, it's going to cause some frustrations. But the reality is, if we don't, what's the alternative? We're going to continue down the bad path that we're going. We're going to continue to not educate our kids in the way that they're deserving of. And at the end of the day, you're going to lose a lot of great, phenomenal educators because they're just going to throw their hands up in frustration.
And they are.
And they are. Absolutely. Yep. So at some point I might like to connect you with Maxine. I think you would love her. She's really phenomenal. You guys would have a lot to talk about because it is an important problem that not just one individual can fix. We need to create an army of people that are committed to making a difference, not to be, too self promoting, but I mean, there's a ripple here, right? There's an opportunity to create the action that can carry forward for generations, and it can educate our kids, and it can help them be better stewards of what they need to do as members of society, and recognize that they have an opportunity to play a role in fixing it as well, and be our future, generation of creating those educators that are going to go out there and make the differences, keeping those differences going forward. Right.
Right. And I think, as I said in that training, that we're using the wrong theoretical models.
Yeah.
Part of what's happening, and in all defense of the whole system, a lot of information systems that we have now, we didn't have 10, 15 years ago.
Yep.
Particularly the neurobiology systems, how the brain actually develops, how the external environment impacts that development, how that impacts learning and memory and behavior. And I think now that we're getting those pieces, but there's a guy out of California. His name is Safro, and he runs the Institute for the Human Future. And he says this: it takes 20 to 25 years before you become an overnight success. Okay. Yeah. And it takes that many years before you can get above the radar in a community and change the model. And so I've been doing the framework for understanding poverty for 25, 26 years now. And somebody at the beginning had said to me, Ruby, you just think you're going to change the world. And I laughed right out loud. And I said, you got to be crazy. I said, if that's myopic, if I don't hear in 25 years, this kid can't learn because he's poor, if I just don't hear that one comment, I will feel like we've moved along the continuum.
Yeah.
And in another 25 years, if we just don't have this 3 strikes and you're out approach, if we can have a better, deeper understanding of emotional development. And one of the things we're doing right now, which I think in 20 years, we're going to look back and say that was criminal. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that we take a kid, if a kid comes in and can't read, we know what to do about that. A kid comes into the school system with emotional issues, we smack a label on them, we put them in special ed, we contain them, we call them emotionally disturbed. But we don't really know how you go about building in those structures that in their environment were not available. And we're going to have to go there.
Yeah. One thing that stood out to me that I really found fascinating was, and you didn't necessarily put it in these words, but this is how I interpreted it, is we're really good about talking about that kid or, that group of kids. We're not good at talking with those kids.
Right.
And the challenge I think that I found that you were sort of the gauntlet you were throwing down is, you know, figuring out how to not default to the labels that have become the default, right? And at the end of the day, finding a way to say, show and recognize, and that's what I do through my work with Ripple is you shine a light on somebody and you say, I'm paying attention to you and I'm recognizing your bad behavior, but I'm also recognizing your good behavior, but I see you, right? I see you and why these things are occurring. And I'm interested in figuring out how to play a role in helping you in some capacity. And when you can do that, doesn't matter what age, right? When you can actually be that one small bright moment in their day. And I loved how you shared that on your training about the fact that you have to be engaged in the community. You have to be engaged in that student body and recognize and equip your staff in order to see behavior changes and shifts. And especially now when everything could be bumping along great for you as a student, and then somebody says something or does something on social media to bring negative attention to you, and it can flip like that, right? And in an instant, you have to be really cognizant of that. And you only get there when you are a engaged community of teachers and administrators, and you're out from behind the desk and you're in front of those students day to day. I love that because I see it in the corporate world where underperformers or maybe performers that you'd much rather have someone else doing their job, but we don't have somebody to take the job. You shine the light on them and say, look, we hired you for a reason. We believed in you then, we believe in you now. You may not turn all of them, but you will turn a lot of them. And at the end of the day, you are, just by the nature of your action, creating such a positive ripple for that person in that moment, in that day. And yeah, does it carry forward for the next 3 hours? I don't know, but it might. And the reality is, if you do it continually and over again, the potential for you to completely transform that child's behavior and mindset is huge.
Right. And I don't know if you know this, is an aside, but Wall Street Journal just had a book review in it about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. Somebody had reviewed Jack Welch's, Jack Welch's bottom of the 10%, cut them out every year.
Yep.
One of the things they showed is that every corporation that's used that method has
Where are they today? Where are they? Yeah.
All lost shareholder values.
Yes.
And when I read about it years ago, I thought that is stupid.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't care how highly touted that is. It's not a good practice. Okay?
No.
And now, when you look at all the companies that used it and lost shareholder value, I mean, significant. It's exactly what you're saying. It doesn't have value.
It doesn't. And when you put it back into the school environment, imagine the irreparable harm that you are creating with that child when you've put that label. Now it's out amongst their peers and they're now isolated. And there's these situations which, if you had just taken some time to get to know the kid and figure out what's going on, is it a home situation? Is it an economic situation? Like you said, a lot of these kids come from really strong, economic disadvantage, but they're not insurmountable. And there's opportunities, there's programs, and there's not a panacea or a fix for all of it. I get that. But at the end of the day, you have to understand with what you're dealing with first before you just make wide assessments on, why there's the problem and what the problem is and how do we push that up under the rug as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can.
Well, and in a lot of ways, one of the things I think is that you look, the education right now has been hijacked, okay, by economic interests,
yes,
by legal interests, okay. A lot like the medical field has been hijacked by pharmaceutical companies and legal issues as well. So I think until we can move, that model has hurt us, okay? And one of the things I said for a long time is that practice of, if you don't pass this test, you have to repeat the grade, like 5th grade, 8th grade. People wonder why so many bullies are out there right now, why we have so many people who are bullying. Well, we bullied them.
Yeah.
We bullied them. We went to a system of 3 strikes, you're out. You don't get this. You don't get to play. You don't get to move with your friends. there wasn't a lot of compassion in the system for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what do you see for the district leader that might be out there, that is maybe a new superintendent or someone that's coming through the ranks that's going to have an opportunity to play a role in creating that change management within that community? What are some of the tips that you might provide them that they could begin to implement now? Because the way that I look at it is very similar to a corporation, right? You're coming in as the new person trying to implement, and the resistance of the old guard is, we've tried that, doesn't work, or we've done it this way forever. Schools are very similar because there's a built-in, like you said, almost this bully process within the process, that really creates some strong headwind for those emerging leaders. So do you have any ideas or tips that you could share here about that?
Well, first of all, I would recommend to them that they read the book called Tempered Resilience. That book, that guy has the best information in there. Now, he talks about religious organizations, but leadership. But he says there's a failure of heart and a failure of nerve. Okay. Nerve, both of those will destroy a leader. And he said failure of nerve is when you don't have the courage to move forward. Failure of heart is when you no longer have the desire and you get disconnected.
Wow.
And he said, what will make that happen? The failure of heart is when your internal staff become, they sabotage you. They, as a whole, work to maintain. You have to have adaptive leadership, and there's organizations want to pull back to the norm, and how you do that. So one of the things I would do if I were a superintendent right now, or a principal, either one of the first things I would do into the community, and I think I said in that workshop, I took over a very difficult elementary school.
Yeah.
You have got to assess immediately as fast as you can. And what I did is, it was known as a very difficult staff. So what I did is I interviewed each staff member privately for 30 to 45 minutes to get to know them prior to school ever starting. The second thing I did is I found out who the parent players in the community were. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things is you talk to them. I know one principal that took over a school that was failing, and he spent the summer making visits to the parents, introducing himself, saying, if you have a problem, come talk to me. So you have to be able to get the community aspect, the parents with you, and you've got to get your staff. And then the second thing you got to be able to do is you got to be able to stand up to your staff. And I find a lot of administrators won't do that. And one story that I didn't tell is that they hired me for one reason, is their achievement scores were so low. They were in the 40th percentile. And this is a very affluent school. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I remember the first faculty meeting, which I approached it, and they said to me, oh no, the test is awful. I said, really? I said, you know that district that's 10 miles up the road that has all those poor kids in it that we don't have? I said, help me understand why their scores are better than ours. Said, it's a bad test. I said, that sounds like somebody who always loses the football game and say they had a bad ref every time.
Yeah.
I said, we're either as good as we say we are or we're not.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
And I said, number two, if we don't address this problem, somebody's going to come in and tell us how they think it should be addressed.
Yeah.
I said, so here's the deal. I'm going to lay out a process. Your expertise is in the process. My job is to monitor the process. Let me tell you what the process is. This is what we're going to do. And we're moving through this, but your expertise will drive the process. I'm monitoring the process.
Wow.
And I laid it out for him. And within 2 years, we went from 4th place in the district to 1st place in math scores. And, but you gotta lay it on the table.
Yeah. You're striking me at a nerve. When I first became an entrepreneur, I mentioned I was the Xerox agent, and I got an opportunity to take over their Xerox service agent as well, or the agent territory. And we were dead last in the country. And one of the things that I recognized, and I was not a technician, I didn't have technical skills or abilities. I really had no business doing what they were asking me to do. But the first thing I did was I tried to assess what the major problems were. And you went out and talked to customers and you said, where are your challenges? What are your frustrations? Well, nobody calls us. Nobody does what they say they'll do. Response times are horrible. And if they're going to be late, they don't even tell you. And so when we had the opportunity to bring in the service team that we did, I said, we're going to change everything because we're going to do the service correctly from the very beginning. We're going to spend more time both in improving parts and anything else that we think might be a problem, not just the root problem, but looking, holistically. Of course, you got a lot of pushback because you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm a young kid and I've never done this before. And they're like, this is, suicide for you. You're gonna, Xerox is gonna come down hard on you. And I said, they're going to come down even harder if we don't fix the problem. The reason the program exists, the reason that you guys are here and opposed to not working with them any longer is because, they don't want you. I want to prove that they made a mistake by not bringing you or keeping you as an employee, but, pushing you over to this agency model. And I want to do it. And I want to improve customers and I want to make them happy that they made a choice to stick here. And I would say 90% of them want to go elsewhere. So how do we fix that? And you have to get to the root cause, which is committed people to do what, to solve the problem and do what they say they'll do when they say they'll do it. And that's really been that mandate that has driven everything I've done as an entrepreneur. And, we were, by the way, the dead last, and we became the number one, service agent in the country because we solved the problem. And very similar to what you're talking about, at the end of the day, it takes a lot of courage. You got to have the nerve. I love that. But, you also have to have the heart behind why are we putting the nerve there? But I got to have that, I got to have that motivation that there's a problem here that needs to be fixed. And maybe it's been this way forever, but that was forever. And this is here now. And we start the war from here.
And then the other thing I think I said in that workshop is you have to address individuals.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And people don't want to do that either.
Yeah.
And partly they don't know how. See, I don't know about the corporate world, but I know in the school business, they dropped. In the 80s, they used to do a lot of conflict resolution training with administrators. They dropped it all.
Yeah.
So you've got all these administrators in there have no idea how you deal with conflict. Okay. And fortunately, I had a lot of training in it, and you have to, but I think I said in the meeting, I had this faculty member who, when I took this job, the rumor was that he would get mad and throw kids up against the wall.
Ooh.
So I thought, I got to nip this in the bud before we ever start. Okay.
Yeah.
So I found him before school started and I said, hey, I've heard a rumor about you. I said, now, sure, it's a rumor, but I've heard several, as a matter of fact. I said, one, I've heard you're a really good teacher. And he grinned and he said, I am. I said, I've also heard another one. I said, now, I'm sure it's a rumor, but I've heard you get mad and throw kids up against the wall. And he didn't smile. He didn't say anything. I said, well, I'm sure it's a rumor, but I have to tell you, there would be a consequence. I would do whatever I could to get your teaching certificate pulled so you can't teach. I said, but I'm sure it's a rumor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing is, you have to be able to lay stuff on the line. And there was a considerable pushback from him. I mean,
oh, yeah.
One time he was so angry at me, he came in and he said, you're the worst principal I've ever seen. I said, that may be, but I am the principal. And as long as I am the principal, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
You just have to lay it.
Well, and you see that, right? In a lot of environments, the people that are so resistant to change recognize already at their level, you just have to meet them there, right? But they already know they're a failure or they're failing in some capacity and they're getting away with it. So they don't like anybody that disrupts that. But on the flip side, some of those people that have that response and reaction, they need somebody to stand up to them and say, well, look, like you said, I'm here now. So, you can, hoop and holler and throw your fit as much as you want. It's not going to make any difference. This is still how we're going to do it. This is how the process is. I've been a soccer coach for 28 years. I know exactly how I can create elite athletes. I know exactly what to do. And not everybody loves it. But the problem the problem players were some of my greatest victories because at the end of the day, they didn't see themselves being better than they were. In fact, they saw themselves being so bad as what they thought they were, or what, other people viewed them as. They were the ones that were the biggest victories, because you could convert them from being, worst to first. And those are people that will go out there and make a difference. And you have to remind them occasionally, like that, that bad teacher, if that turned around, I've heard you're a very good teacher, and I'm counting on you to be, not only what you've been, but 10x what you've been, because I need you, and I need you on this team. But I also need to make sure that some of this, other stuff that's happening can't continue. And maybe that's what you felt you needed to do in the moment or whatever, but it's not gonna fly. I love your approach, because more leaders need to be that way. But to your point, not a lot of them, especially in the school districts, not a lot of them have been taught that, right? Many of them don't have that training or that experience behind them to help them figure out how to make it through those processes, because they just didn't get any formal education in that.
I think that that's a problem right now, because they're getting in the position younger and younger and younger.
Yes.
With less and less training.
And
not that young is bad.
Yeah. No, but at the end of the day, that, young comes with two deficits, right? Lack of experience. And oftentimes you're getting put into that position because we can put you into that position because your financial demands are less. And when you think of the grand scheme of things, you're actually setting these people up to fail, because you're not giving them the tools and the skills and abilities necessarily to be successful. But then when they keep hitting their head against the wall, that's where you have this mass, resignation that's occurring. And it's true in education. It's true in the corporate world. And at the end of the day, it's a broken system that is designed to cause more failures than successes. And I don't know who designed it, but I do think people like yourself and the work you're doing, you're defying those odds. And you're saying, we're going to change that. And we may have to do it one district at a time, one superintendent at a time. But I have so much respect and admiration for the work you're doing and everything that you stand for today, because I think it's so needed.
Thank you. And at the end of the day, I think when you look at your life and you're 100 years old and you're sitting on your porch, I think you have to ask yourself, did I leave it a little bit better?
Yeah.
Did I make a difference for somebody? Did I, because I feel like I've been very lucky to have incredible mentors who gave me, I think it's an adult responsibility to mentor, to take people to the next place, so
Absolutely.
that you can take a society to a better place. I think it's always been that way.
Yeah.
And it's always been it's important.
It is important. Absolutely. Everybody has a responsibility to somebody else. So when you recognize and understand that, it makes life, infinitely more interesting and so much more rewarding, because now you're not just doing it for yourself. You're actually contributing out there in the world and benefiting others. Right.
One thing in that book, Tempered Resilience, he quotes a lot of people, but one of the things he says is that almost everyone has a crucible. Every leader has a crucible. It's kind of like when you started that and you got, am I going to make this work or not? I have no idea if I can. It becomes a defining moment. It becomes a crucible, pivotal for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
And I think it's so helpful when you have been lucky enough to have a mentor who has had a crucible and can move you beyond where you are.
Yep. And then you take yours and you apply it, to someone else, that impact has, a real, a real value to someone else, because you're taking what you learned from your mentor and apply how you applied it to your work. And then you adjusted it, and how you are able to take it and apply it so that someone else can benefit from, some of the challenges, some of the beats that you've taken in your life and career. I mean, those things are so critical. And it's funny, because in today's world, in today's society, how people seem so unsure and or resistant to share those things, right? Like, well, what do I have to contribute? What do I have to do? I have a fair amount of teachers that follow me on Twitter, and It is amazing how many of them are like, I don't see the impact that I'm making. It's like you have you just being there. When you walk into that school and you stand before those kids and you have the ability to actually recognize each and every one of them for who they are as individuals. And if you look at them, not above them, not below them, not around them, but at them, you are making a difference. And you have to understand sometimes it's not the big ripples that you create, it's the small ripples. Just by, and you said it in your workshop, is the just recognizing a child as they come in the door, seeing it and just saying, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you are here today, because yesterday was great. Tomorrow will be better. But today I'm super glad that you're here. Who doesn't want to feel that, right? And for the work that you do, obviously with a lot of these kids that come from really challenging home environments, that may be the only person that says that to them all day or all week.
Well, and one of the things I've said to a lot of educators is this: they don't understand. They think they only touch the people in front of them, but they actually, in the research, they actually touch 2 more generations. Okay.
Yep.
Because those kids in front of them teach to their kids what they taught to them a lot of times,
Yep.
and their children teach to the next generation. I mean, they say when the average person dies, this is status kind of is older, but about 20, 30 people show up at the funeral. But when an educator dies, there's like 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the impact is just unbelievable over generations. And I just think, no, you're trying to look at your impact in the short term. You want this kid to come back to you. And then I'll ask them this question: how many of you had a teacher who made a huge difference for you? And how many of you have gone back and found that teacher and told them?
Yeah. Okay. Tell them thank you. Yeah.
But you don't.
That's right.
You're not sure where that teacher is anymore. You're not sure, a couple I'd like to go back and tell, hey, you did a great job. I've over years really thought about it. They're both passed on. Do you know something? Just like, I can't do that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I do with my corporate audience is I have that one very similar activity where I ask them to, who's the most influential connection you've ever made in your life? And almost everybody instantly has that person pop to mind. And whether they're here or not, I generally have them write out, what would you say to them if you could right now? And you wouldn't have any judgment, nothing, but, a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, a whole couple of pages. Write it and put it down. And even if that person is not there, then what I want you to do, I want you to put that in an envelope. I want you to put it in your sock drawer, your underwear drawer, someplace that you're eventually going to come to, and you're going to touch that envelope at some point. You're going to pull that out. And you're going to go, guess what? I'm going to reread those words. I'm going to remember that activity. And I'm also going to just say a quiet word of thanks. No matter where you are out there in the world, heaven, universe, wherever you believe, they're going to know it. They're going to hear it, and you're going to feel better because you did it. And, to your point, for those that are still amongst the living, when you take that chance and you reach out to them and say, I know you don't remember me from 40 years ago, but you made a difference in my life. Oh my gosh. That's the ultimate reward that anybody thinks. It wasn't all the raises. It wasn't all the accolades. It's those people that come back to you to say, look, you made a difference. And I just want you to know it, however many years it's been.
Yeah. And I'm always amused when kids right now, their favorite future stories, I'm going to be famous on YouTube. I'm going to be a famous YouTuber. And I'm like, really? Right. I mean, fame is, 10 days after you're dead. There's a lot of people don't even know you passed on. It's like, if you asked Americans right now who are the first 4 presidents, they can't even tell you.
Yeah.
And that's only been 200 years. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
250. I mean, it's just, so I think that the true impact is the individual impact.
I agree. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's so great. Well, I could talk to you for a long time. We're going to have to do a sequel here, but I always like to wrap these interviews up with just a few ripple connection questions that I like to ask my guests. You have gone from education, you were in the classroom, then you became, a principal, and you've moved on and you've got your own company, right? AHA, which I love the naming convention of it. What do you think is the best thing about being an entrepreneur in your mind?
The best or the worst?
How about both? What's the best first?
The best is that you can actually kind of determine one thing that's been a hard lesson to learn is this: nobody thinks like you do. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't. And the idea that you could replicate your thinking doesn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a hard lesson to learn. Okay. Number two, the best thing is that you can, however difficult, kind of figure out a path that you think is the best way forward. But one of the things that's in this book, again, on leadership, and I think it's in my mind since I've so recently read it, is this idea that every leader at some point in time begs for relief. All right. Dear God, how did you get me in this, and why?
Yes.
You know, in fact, this guy, he's very religious, but he cites, he said, Jeremiah, Moses, Joshua, they all begged to die, right? Just let me die. This is too hard. And I think that there's that part of it as well, where you have to take that next level of heat and endure it in order to get where you're going. So I think the best thing about being an entrepreneur is that it ends up facilitating your own growth significantly.
I love
in ways that you would never, ever think about.
Absolutely. Oh, great answer. I love that. What do you think your greatest superpower is?
I think my gift is that I can take complex information, simplify it, make it easy to understand, and provide how-to pieces.
I love that. Yeah, I would say from watching from the audience, you take all of that and you incorporate that into a story very well, and you're gifted in that capacity, and to the point where you can take statistical and really hard hitting, heavy information and boil it down into a way that really gets somebody to say, "Wow, I need to know more about that. I'm curious." And I mean, that's a gift.
Well, you know, one of the gifts in my life, my dad was a minister. Okay.
Oh, wow.
He was a great storyteller. Okay. And I learned from him in this way. He was the only minister, and he was a minister for 35 years, and we had to go to church 3 times a week. Okay. So you can't, nobody's gifted enough to do different sermon over and over and again for 35 years. Right. So he recycled them. Okay.
Yeah.
And he'd recycle them, and he'd change a detail here or there, whatever. Now, I remember sitting there listening because I'm a captive audience. I remember sitting there thinking, nope, you missed the point there. Nope, that was the wrong story for that point. Nope, you should have said this. Your last sermon on this was better than this one. Nope, you did this one wrong. Nope, that story had nothing to do with your point. Why'd you stick it in, right? But in Vacation Bible School, he used to make up stories so that kids would keep coming back every day. So he'd tell you part of the story, and he'd go, now, if you want to hear the next piece of this story, you have to come tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I love that.
I was intrigued. And one day I said to him, all right, Dad, just tell me ahead of time how the story's going to end. And you know what he said to me? I don't really know.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
I kind of have to wait myself.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, let me ask you, where do you find your inspiration? I think I might have an idea, but I'm curious.
I'm curious. I've always been curious. I want to know why, how things work and why. One time my mother, I don't know, I was 6 or 7. She was so upset with me because I asked so many questions. She said to me, well, Ruby, if you don't know, it's certainly not your fault, is it?
That's awesome.
So, I don't really know. I think it's innate need to understand.
That is one of the neatest responses to that question, though, that I've gotten. I think I love that because, there is a tremendous amount of inspiration in staying curious. It's just such a powerful, powerful skill that many of us lose as we get into adulthood, right? When you're a kid and you've got this wide-eyed optimism about what the world holds for us, it's easy because the world is, we believe our life is still yet to unfold. But as adults, we get back into the same old, the mundane of just adulting, and we lack that curiosity of anything. And the people that I know that are the most happy are the ones that are constantly learning something new, or they're studying something new, or they're exploring new things that they can share and bring up. And as I, I help people for a living connect and engage and build relationships. And the best connectors out there are the ones that are consummate learners. They have curiosity about the world and how it works.
Well, it offends some people. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I just want to say that I'm right now thinking a lot about how people negotiate the last third of their life. Okay, aging. And I was very fortunate to have a neighbor. He passed away at 94.
Wow.
But he was amazing, and I got to meet him when he was about 80. Okay, and he every 3 years he would reinvent himself.
I love it.
And he found a new thing to be interested in.
Yeah.
And I think it's very hard as you get older to do that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, but it's not impossible. It's certainly something that I think takes a fair amount of work. But like your neighbor proved, you can do it if you're committed.
I think he just didn't want to be bored.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that they say as you get older, right? That's what when the work stops and the day to day, the need for people to need you from day to day goes away. That often ends when we end our careers. That's ultimately what ends up getting us is the boredom and just the same old mundane. And I for one, and I suspect you'll be the same, just can't do that. I will have to always be doing something, working on something, and applying something I've learned, because I think it's the secret to a long, happy life.
Right. I have a whole bunch of topics I intend to do that with when I'm not
so busy and in demand. I love it. I love it. Well, my last question is, the concept of this podcast is the ripple effect, right? And for me, the ripple effect is just part of me. It's ingrained in my DNA. It's having conversations like this. I mean, you and I don't know each other, but I think people will see this and feel like, God, you guys could have been friends, and we will. I mean, sorry, you're stuck with me now, Ruby. This is,
good. I need all the friends I can get.
All right, good. Yeah.
I only have 5 right now.
Well, see, 6 is my lucky number. So there you go. That was it. Yeah, it was predestined. But what does the ripple effect mean to you?
Well, I think that I love that analogy, and I love that you call your podcast the ripple effect. But I think that the ripple effect is that it's not possible for one person to touch everybody's life, but it is possible for an idea to touch many people's lives.
Okay? I love that. That's great.
That is a ripple.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, I will tell you, I mean, you are touching a lot of lives as an individual, but what you're doing, the work you're doing, and how I saw it ripple out at the event that I was at, I think you are 100% a rippler. I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful that event brought us together and our paths crossed, because you said something at the very beginning. I tell every audience that I speak to, which is, people show up in your life for very specific reasons at the very specific time that they do. But if you don't take the time to look up and look out and recognize it and then do something about it, you're gonna miss something great. And so I'm so grateful that I had the courage to walk up to you in the hallway that day. I'm so grateful that you had that I had the experience of seeing you speak and do your presentation in both days. And it was very powerful. And I have talked to many people about your work since then. And so you created a ripple in a big way, at least in my life. And I know of the lives of the people that were there that day. And I'm just so appreciative. And I look forward to, being number 6 on the friendship roster.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We will definitely get back. I mean, I think we have some ideas on some other episodes we could do. So I will come back to you with those soon. And I promise I will be on time for that. I am so grateful that you were patient with me as I had a meeting run long, but I am so grateful that we did this. I mean, you are you're fantastic. So just before we go, just so everybody knows, and we'll put some show notes up with links, but how would you like people to learn more about your work? Obviously you've got the books on Amazon, so give the plug for the titles there, and then how you would like people to interact with you on social or otherwise.
Well, the best way is to go to AHA Process, AHAPROCESS.com. Okay. Or they can Google Ruby Payne and that'll come up.
Yep.
But we don't actually right now, we're not selling emotional poverty on Amazon because Amazon
okay.
55%.
Yeah. I know.
Okay. So the bottom line, we're like, not this time. I understand there's resellers that have it up there like for twice the price.
Oh, okay. I did see that. I thought, well, that didn't seem right, but okay, now that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, they're buying it and double the price, but they can, go to ahaprocess.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And are you on social platforms, Twitter?
Yeah, Ruby Payne.
Okay.
On Twitter. And I'm hoping that Twitter becomes a little saner. Anyway, yeah, we do more on Facebook and more on
okay.
But yeah, LinkedIn. But yeah, it's
great.
there.
Yeah, I've enjoyed following your content on LinkedIn, and so yeah, that I highly encourage everybody to go look because they can send you a contact request, but I'm sure you get tons of those. But they can also follow you just to stay in the loop about what you're putting out there.
Yeah, and that is a learning curve I need to get better on.
Well, I can help you there. So there you go. So,
all righty.
Anything I can do to create a positive ripple for all the ripples that you're out there creating in the world, I feel like that's my duty and obligation. So you call me, I'm your personal assistant on that.
Oh, good. All right. I'm going to do that. All right.
All right. Well, guys, this has been a phenomenal episode. I'm so grateful that Dr. Ruby Payne joined us today. Ruby, you're just a delight. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll be back with another new episode of the Ripple Effect podcast very soon. But until then, Ruby, ripple on.